To confirm, we are going to have you pinned, correct?
Are you asking the interpreters?
Yes, correct.
I believe
Okay.
that's what they've done in the past. Erin, do you know?
Okay, what was the question?
Yes, I believe so.
We keep you pinned, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
very good.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, Sophia, let's get going. Good evening, everyone. Please give us a brief moment while we get our slides going. Okay. Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening. So in order to best take advantage of tonight's meeting, I encourage all participants to join their preferred language channel by selecting the interpretation globe at the bottom of your screen. By selecting this preferred language, you're actually able to simultaneously hear the translation of other participants who may speak a different language than you. So tonight we have American Sign Language, Spanish, Hmong, and Punjabi available for participants. And before we actually open the interpretation channels, I'd like to invite everyone, our spoken interpreters to relay this message in their language. So William for Spanish. All right, William, you're able to unmute.
Saludos, mi nombre es William Cruz. Para seleccionar su lenguaje de interpretación, presiona en el globito del mundo abajo de su pantalla y escuchará la traducción en español. Gracias.
And Lauren Hmong.
nhớ cho sẽ sao cho thằng đó cho này chỉ cái tin cha sẽ là này là còn phải mà nó nhớ cho nó phải lúc trong sĩ thằng nó phải xả cho và xả có mỗi cho luôn ăn kín nó xài luôn món nó chạy thọ này xài lu luôn tê họ cá hay tê món nó chạy là mà lấy sẵn này một số họ về này thì lên họ phải hay xài cho luôn mà nó nè ở trong tàu.
Thank you. And Kulvinder and Punjabi.
Okay. ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ। ਅੱਜ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਮੀਟਿੰਗ ਸ਼ਾਮਲ ਹੋਏ ਹੋਗੇ ਤਾਂ ਅੱਜ ਇਹ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਮੀਟਿੰਗ ਦੀ ਸੁਣਨਾ ਚਾਹੋਗੇ ਤਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਕੀ ਆਈਕਨ ਆ ਥੱਲੇ ਸਕਰੀਨ ਦੇ ਥੱਲੇ ਉਹ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਚੁਣਿਓ ਤਾਂ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਫਿਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਚੁਣਿਓ ਫਿਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸੁਣ ਸਕੋਗੇ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਫਿਰ ਸਾਰੇ ਇੰਟਰਪ੍ਰੀਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਚੈਨਲ ਖੋਲ ਜਾਓਗੇ ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਅੱਜ ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੀ ਰਾਏ ਦੇਣਾ ਮੰਗਦੇ ਆ ਇਹਨੀ ਸਾਰੀ ਹਨਾ ਇਹਨੀ ਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੇਤੀ ਮੀਟਿੰਗ ਖਤਮ ਹੋ ਗਈ ਫਿਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣਾ ਹੱਥ ਚੱਕਣਾ ਜਾਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਫੋਨ ਤੋਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਨੰਬਰ 9 ਉਹ ਦੱਬਣਾ ਫਿਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੀ ਕਮੈਂਟ ਦੇ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ
Thank you so much. So the interpretation lines are now active and I'll give everyone a moment to join their respective channels. So for the benefit of the public, this meeting is being recorded. We're also broadcasting on CMAC3 government channel at cmac.tv/gov, on Comcast Xfinity channel 96, AT&T Uverse channel 99, and the City of Fresno Facebook Live. So your participation in tonight's meeting is considered consent to be recorded. Everyone will remain muted during the presentation, and public comments will be taken after speakers. So to provide verbal comment, please feel free to click the raise hand button on your screen or dial 9 if you're joining us by phone. We also have available the Q&A option for those who'd like to type their comments to us live. Again, thank you so much for joining, and I will now hand it over to Sofia Pagalatos, Planning Manager of the Planning and Development Department.
Thank you, Summer, and welcome again to the City of Fresno Housing Element Annual Progress Report Workshop. This evening, we're going to do introductions. We're going to spend most of the evening talking about our 2020 Housing Element Progress Report. We also have partners here that are going to share some of their highlights from 2020. We'll go over next steps, and then we'll have public comment. We expect to be finished by 8 o'clock this evening. And some of the icons that you see at the bottom of the screen are what you need to do in order to raise your hand or submit a question. So I'd like to briefly introduce the panelists that are here this evening. Some of them will be presenting and they'll be helping to answer questions. So I'm going to start with Kelly Furtado from the Fresno Housing, previously known as Fresno Housing Authority. Kelly, would you like to introduce yourself?
Certainly. Hi, thank you for having me this evening. I'll be doing my best to represent our body of work in 2020, and I am, as Sophia said, with Fresno Housing. I am the Assistant Director of Strategic Initiatives, and I've been there for a little bit under 2 years, working probably more virtually than I had in the office. So thank you again for having me.
Yes, and Miguel Arambola from Self-Help Enterprises.
Yeah, thanks, Sophia. I'm Miguel Arambula with Self-Help Enterprises, and happy to be here with everybody. Talk about some of our projects and how people can get involved.
Great. And Drew Wilson.
I am Drew Wilson. I'm a planner with the Long Range Planning Division for the City of Fresno.
Thank you. And Casey Lauderdale.
Hi, everyone. My name is Casey Lauderdale, and I am also a planner with the Long Range Planning Division for the City of Fresno.
And H. Spies, could you introduce yourself, please? Oh, I think you might be muted, H.
Got it. Is that better?
That's better.
Hi, Sophia. Hi, everyone. I'm H. Spies. I'm Director of Housing and Homeless Initiatives for the Dyer Administration.
Thank you very much. So we also have Tom Morgan with the city's Housing and Community Development Division. You want to say a word?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tom Morgan. I'm the Housing Manager for the Housing and Community Development Division in Planning and Development.
Okay. And Summer, did you have something to add?
No, I'm so sorry. Thank you.
That's okay. And Mike Sanchez, our Assistant Director.
Good evening. My name is Mike Sanchez, Assistant Director over Long Range Planning. I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's discussion.
Okay. So we're going to start out by talking about what is a housing element. The housing element is basically the city's strategy for providing housing. It is it's on an 8-year cycle, and pardon me, I just skipped a slide. The housing element is on an 8-year cycle. It requires certification by a state agency, and it's really the city's overall housing plan. The goal of the housing strategy is to promote the production of safe, decent, and affordable housing for all community residents. The housing element is like an umbrella for all of the city's housing related initiatives. So it's the large policy document, and underneath that umbrella are things like the consolidated plan, which designates how money from HUD is spent, the annual action plan, the analysis of impediments, homelessness initiatives, the anti-displacement task force, or land use plans. All of these are underneath the broad umbrella of the housing element. So our annual progress report is something that we do every year to share the progress that we hope we've made toward the initiatives in the housing element. This is what our annual progress report looks like this year. It is available on our website, and it has many more details than what I'm going to be able to go into tonight. But we also produce something called a highlights brochure, which gives just the highlights of the housing element annual progress report. And we do provide that in Spanish, Hmong, and Punjabi. So it is available also on our website, and we're happy to share that with you. So when we're doing our annual progress report, we're really focusing on 3 inputs in purple at the top of the screen, and that's housing production, our sites inventory, and I'll talk about what that means, and our program implementation. And then what we want out of it is to identify challenges and trends. Of course, we want to engage the public, and we want you to help us measure overall success. So the first thing we talk about is housing production. And housing production is really kind of a complicated process, and it ends up looking like a funnel. It starts out with an applicant or a builder applying for the planning entitlement. And then it goes through like a funnel until finally building permits are issued, and then a unit is actually constructed. So we monitor this for our annual progress report. And in 2020, what we see here is that the city, you can see sort of that here are the processes that I just went over, and looking at the totals, they sort of go down like a funnel. So there were planning applications for 2,645 units submitted in 2020, and there were 1,224 units actually constructed in 2020, 85 of which were affordable housing units. And that's defined based on deed restrictions and the state density bonus program. This shows where the building permits that were issued in 2020 were located. I'm hearing some translation come through.
Lord, have you left the Hmong channel?
No, I don't believe so.
Oh.
Can you put me back in, please? Thank you.
One moment.
Okay, so we're going to share now, getting to the core section of our housing element annual progress report. There are 5 objectives, and these are land for housing, affordable housing, removal of government constraints, conserving existing housing, and equal housing opportunity. And we have a total of 28 programs that fall into those 5 objectives. And we're going to give you highlights of our progress on those programs. So the first one is, the state calls it adequate sites. I like to call it land for housing. And it relates to the city's responsibility to provide enough land to facilitate the development of a variety of housing types and costs. And the amount of land that the city needs to provide is determined through the state and a regional process that's called the RHNA, the Regional Housing Needs Allocation. It is a planning goal to meet housing demand, and it's divided up by affordability levels. So the city's RHNA for its current housing element, which is an 8-year period, is that it needs to have enough land zoned properly to accommodate 23,565 housing units across these various affordability levels. And those affordability levels are determined by density. So the state views that land that can facilitate housing that's affordable to extremely and very low income households should be zoned at 30 units to the acre and higher. And there are different density levels for all of these land capacity requirements. And this table might be a bit mind-boggling, but what this shows is over here are in the left, in the blue column, is our RHNA, or Regional Housing Needs Allocation, the 23,000 units. And if we look, there are a few key takeaways. In this column, 2015 through 2019, the first 4 years of our housing element, you can see that 9,378 units were constructed, or actually permits issued, of which about 700 of those were affordable to low and very low income households. In 2020, 2,252 building permits were issued, of which 68 were affordable to low income households. And you can see that over the housing element period in total, 11,630 units have been built, which is averaging about 2,000 units per year, just to give you an overall idea. The city needs to maintain enough land supply to accommodate the RHNA goals, and right now the city does continue to maintain adequate sites. So the next objective is assisting in the development of affordable housing. And the city, as you know, is not really an affordable housing developer in and of itself, but it tries to finance and partner with others who are. So we'll highlight some of those projects. This year, one of the tools that the city has is a density bonus. And what that does is it allows more units to be built whenever affordable housing units are proposed. One density bonus project was approved this year near Peach and Butler for 11 units. Another really important function that the city has is to administer annual funds of several types in order to create more affordable housing. And you can see sort of the pie here, and it's grown by a little bit. We have a little over 7 million in community development block grant funds. We have emergency solutions grant and HOPLA. We have, that's here, I'm sorry. And there's a total of about $15 million. One of our new sources of funding is the permanent local housing allocation, which is here, it's 3.4 million. We also received one-time funding sources this last year that we wanted to highlight. One of them is a local early action planning grant for $750,000. And part of the plan for that grant is to explore creating an affordable housing trust fund and facilitate construction of more accessory dwelling units, among other things. Also, there were CARES Act funds that were provided to the city as one-time funding this year. And then ongoing, there is the fund I just mentioned, permanent local housing allocation funds. And our housing division administers most of these funds and ensures that they result in construction or rehabilitation of housing. The city, as I mentioned, works through partnerships, and these are some of the partners that the city worked with over the last year. Most of these I'm sure you recognize. This is Lance Cashin, who is working on affordable housing at Fancher Creek, and the Cesar Chavez Foundation that I'll mention in a moment. These partnerships resulted in some housing projects this year. One is Annandale Commons by Self-Help Enterprises that was constructed in Southwest Fresno, 40 affordable senior units. The next project was one from Habitat for Humanity. It was 3 single-family homes on Barcus. And finally, Las Palmas de Sal Gonzalez apartments were completed on Kings Canyon Avenue in Southeast Fresno. And this is a mixture of multifamily and senior affordable housing units. So I'm now to the special needs and emergency shelter portion, and we have a few slides that H. Spies is going to discuss. H?
Yes, thank you, Sophia. So probably anecdotally and also by survey, homelessness is the #1 quality of life issue that most people in Fresno identify as a challenge facing the city. And so this area of special needs and emergency shelter is particularly poignant for us today. This slide indicates that between 2019 and 2020, there was a significant rise in homelessness. And that's based on a point in time count done by about 300 volunteers every year. We didn't do it this year, so we're reaching back to 2019 to 2020. But a significant rise, about a 69% rise, and you can see the rise in terms of sheltered and unsheltered. Next slide, please. Next slide, please, Sophia. Thank you.
Yes.
The total shelter beds that the city of Fresno has today, and this number goes up and down, but is about 1,454. That's about 365 homeless emergency rooms. Project Home Key, which is a new project that you may have heard about that we have done in partnership with Fresno Housing, has provided an additional 277 rooms. And then the biggest chunk has been an addition of 327 rooms through the COVID-19 homeless response. Next slide, please. The challenge is, and I mentioned this earlier, is the growth in the problem. Between 2019 and 2020, we had about a 69% increase in homelessness. If you just do a straight line projection, that comes out to about 4,239 homeless folk in Fresno. And significantly in the box below, that does not include the effect of the ending of the eviction moratorium, June 30th, 2021. So we've had an amazing amount of resources that have been sent our way, but those resources are being outstripped by the incredible rise in homelessness. And this isn't just for Fresno, this is for all West Coast cities especially, but also the country. Next slide, please. So as we make these investments, these critical investments, what are we getting? Well, outcomes as of December 31st of 2020 include 4,411 persons assisted with one or more services, 473 beds added, 201 folks, I think that's 2019 unduplicated persons assisted with overnight shelter, triage, or bridge housing, and 1,226 persons exiting the system with 648 exits to permanent housing. And in the COVID-19 homeless response, which is on top of that, there are the figures there that you see. Next slide, please. I think that's it. So bottom line is that we have had, and I'll just to speak a little bit historically, we can go back one slide, please. Just to look historically, from 2010 to 2017, Fresno had the highest rates of reduction in homelessness of any city on the West Coast, about a 60% reduction in homelessness. However, we have no business glorifying that or celebrating that because, except for the fact that it means that our city is learning how to work together across organizations and institutions and braid its resources in a way that creates collective impact. So that is something to celebrate. But beginning in 2017, we started seeing a significant rise. And as you can see by these numbers, the numbers continue to rise. We're hopeful. We've got some projects that are showing some results. Project Off-Ramp is allowing us to synchronize the relocation of people in our most dangerous real estate, those folks living on the freeway. We had 3 people die in a week and a half, homeless folks from traffic fatalities. But more than that, we are in the process of purchasing additional motels and basically doing anything possible from tiny homes to container homes to all forms of affordable housing to build the continuum from street to home, from street to shelter to transitional housing, permanent housing, and ultimately to home ownership. Thanks, Sophia. You're on mute.
Yes, thank you so much, H, for that. And transitioning to our next program that we wanted to share some good news about, the city and self-help enterprises have partnered to apply for Cal Home grant funds to rehabilitate 21 mobile homes. We know that mobile homes provide good affordable housing, and fingers crossed that we get those funds. We also have a housing element program that supports housing choice vouchers, and Kelly Furtado with Fresno Housing will talk more about that. And that moves us into our third of 5 objectives in the housing element, the removal of governmental constraints, or cut the red tape and roll out the red carpet, as the mayor would say. And one way that we do that is by trying to facilitate downtown development. In 2016, the city passed some new zoning provisions for the downtown that, among other things, streamlined all development that was consistent with the housing element. So in this last year, over 100 units were either permitted or entitled, permitted, or constructed in the downtown, including a housing village for people experiencing homelessness. Also, with investment comes concern about displacement. So one of the housing elements programs is called Downtown Displacement. And the purpose of it is to study displacement, prevent it, and recommend policies that would prevent it in an ongoing way. So the Anti-Displacement Task Force was created in 2018, and it met twice in 2020 to help guide anti-displacement activities. The Thrivance Group was hired to study and make policy recommendations on displacement based on community input. And even during the pandemic, they were really great at reaching a lot of hard to reach people and studying displacement, where it's occurring, how it's occurring. And the results of that study will be out very soon in a report called Here to Stay. Also, to remove governmental constraints, the city expedites processing of applications for housing in a number of ways. Sometimes they get streamlined review. Sometimes they get fee reductions and fee waivers if they are within certain inner city neighborhoods. Also, one of the things we monitor in our housing element is development on very small or very large lots, under 1 acre, over 10 acres. It's thought that these don't really fit the model for development of affordable housing, so we track them. And we did find that there were over 90 small lots that are in some point in the process in developing housing units over the last year. And of those, about 20 included affordable housing units. So it doesn't look like the small lots are a huge barrier to development of affordable housing. On the other hand, there were approximately 20 sites in the process last year for over 10 acres. And right now, we don't know of any affordable housing units that are being developed on those. And we're aware that the sort of sweet spot for the development of affordable housing is between 1 and 10 acres. So the fourth objective in the housing element is to conserve existing housing stock. And one of the things that the city does to do that is to invest in our older neighborhoods and neighborhood infrastructure. And these are the investments that the city made this last year. This is from the highlights brochure on the Housing Element Annual Progress Report. In addition, the city has a home rehabilitation program. It rehabilitated 57 homes in the last 2 years, which meets our housing element goal, which was 23 units per year. And then finally, our last objective in the housing element is equal housing opportunity. And the first program is fair housing services. The city provides funding to the Fair Housing Council of Central California to provide services. They do extensive outreach and education on fair housing. They field discrimination complaints and take on cases. In addition, the city completes an analysis of impediments to fair housing choice, and that was recently updated and adopted by the council in May of 2020. The next program is called Equitable Communities, and it's about balancing investments. So it calls for investing in our older neighborhoods and improving the quality of life in those where a lot of the lower income housing stock is. And it also calls for building more affordable housing in high opportunity neighborhoods. And those are neighborhoods with higher average incomes and high performing schools. So as I mentioned before, the city did make infrastructure investments in all of these neighborhoods here. And in addition, a little over $7 million in CDBG and home funds have been allocated to increase affordable housing development in high opportunity areas. There are other initiatives that are also working to accomplish this balance. The Regional Drive Initiative has equity as a key tenet. Transform Fresno took $66 million of investment from the state and more than doubled that in leveraged investment for 20 projects in Southwest Fresno, Chinatown, and downtown. And then finally, and this is a little bit of a different portion of this program, the program also called for a broad look at how our general plan was being implemented. So in 2020, a general plan implementation review committee was convened. It met 13 times and it generated a report of how well the general plan was being implemented. And that is being submitted in tandem with this report to the state. So again, these are the housing element objectives. And I'm going to just pause for a moment and ask Summer, our technical expert this evening, may we do the polling that I skipped over a couple polling questions. Can we just go through those now, Summer?
Absolutely, give me one moment.
Okay, so we would love to know who's here in the room with us. And so our first question is, can you tell us a little bit more about you? We'd love to know, yes, more about you, how you heard about the workshop. And then I think we have one more question about these objectives. Let's see. So we have, it looks like, mostly government officials or staff, along with housing developer, housing advocates, some residents. Can all of you see the results or just me? Anybody know? Anyway, I don't want to be reading them if you can all see them.
I think we see them. We see them, Sophia.
Okay, thank you.
Oh,
so it looks like email won the day, and community organizations for getting the word out. Super. And can we do the last couple of questions as well?
Looks like
sorry.
Only the panelists can see the poll.
Okay.
The poll results should be sharing now. Attendees are now viewing the poll results.
Okay, thank you so much, Summer. Okay. That's great. So we see participants are mainly residents and government officials or staff. Email was the main way that people knew about the workshop. And are we ready to do the next question? I think I just have one more, Summer. Yes, here it is. So this one relates to the objectives that I just went through. So the 5 housing element objectives: land for housing, affordable housing, removal of government constraints, conservation of existing housing, and equal housing opportunity. What are the most, identify the one that you think is top priority, either for yourself or for the city. Okay. Well, it looks like affordable housing and removal of government constraints were tied for first, with a close second of equal housing opportunity, and then land for housing and conservation of existing housing. Thank you very much for participating in that. And I'm now going to move on. So the last thing we wanted to do is just a bit of a reflection on what are the challenges and the trends for our annual report. And certainly our challenge is just speaking to what you've just told us. We know that we're at least 20,000 units short of for affordable housing units. And I've heard figures as high as 35,000. So we certainly have a challenge there. We have challenges of right now almost a 0 vacancy rate and prices continuing to go up. We also have trends of increased building costs. We've even heard to the tune of $20,000 a unit. So it's a backdrop that just makes it quite challenging, but we are pushing ahead. Also, we are wanting to measure our overall success, and we'll count on you to give us input on that. So now I'd like you to hear from our partners, and I'd like to call Miguel, project manager from Self-Help Enterprises.
Okay, thank you, Sophia. Ooh, can you guys see the slides okay? All right. So some projects that Self-Help, we're a nonprofit corporation, and we work in a 8-county area here in the San Joaquin Valley. I'm a Fresno native and a project manager. Actually went to school at Edison High, which is the neighborhood here of our first project, Annandale Commons. As Sophia mentioned, it's 40 units, 1 to 2 bedroom senior living. It's located at 1515 East Annandale, which is right by Clinica Sierra Vista Medical Clinic and West Fresno Elementary and Middle School. It is senior housing for people over the age of 62. Rents range from $309 to $806 and depend on the resident income. Currently, we are leased up for the property, but we encourage people to call and get on the wait list. And the contact number is listed there, 559-888-2470, I guess, in case anybody's calling in. And we did get funding here from the city of Fresno. There was some home funds and some housing successor funds that helped make the project possible. And just as an addition, we're also, we have a TCC transportation grant to build some bike lanes there. And we're hoping to break ground on our single family subdivision, 22 units of mutual self-help homes in July of next year. We've got a small infill project we were working on with the housing successor. It's a single family home in the Lowell neighborhood built to the Lowell neighborhood design standards. So it's got a nice porch and some wood siding. We currently completed our grading and we're looking to start pouring foundations within the next couple weeks. It will be a 4-bedroom, 2-bath home, approximately 1,400 square feet, and we plan to be done at the end of the year. And it will be affordable to a low-income household at 80% of the area median income. So if somebody's interested, we encourage them to call the phone number there, 559-651-1000, and you can get on the list for that. We do have a Fresno rehabilitation program through our rehab department at Self-Help. They completed 20 homes here in Fresno and 16 are in the rehab process. Rehabs focus on health and safety issues, which can be roof replacement that can cause mold, HVAC repairs, lead-based paint. And so we encourage people, if you think you might qualify, to give a call, and we can see about that one. We also have some home ownership opportunities. So we have the Annandale subdivision down the street from our senior apartments. These will be 22 homes, and typically what happens is residents will get in groups of 10 and they commit to a certain amount of hours in building their own home, and that reduces the costs. And we do have a gateway home ownership program designed to help people figure out if that's something that would apply to them, how they could get ready if they're not ready yet. So if anybody is interested, again, just recommend calling our mainline number listed there. And in addition to these, we also have 16 units at Walnut and Florence, just west of Edison High School, and also where the new community college campus will be located. And if anybody has questions, our main line is listed there, and you can call my boss, Betsy McGovern Garcia, with her number and email. And I'm Miguel Arambula, and that's my number and email. Thank you, Sophia.
Thank you, Miguel. Now we would like to hear from Kelly Furtado from Fresno Housing.
Okay, well, I've got my slides coming up. If Sophia, you can give me a head nod once it's actually working, I would appreciate it.
I can see those slides.
Fantastic. Okay. I am going to kind of get through this pretty quickly. My apologies. It's not showing up on my screen now. So just give me 1 second. Wouldn't you know it? Okay, trying again. Can you guys still see my screen?
We can.
Okay, fantastic. So the Fresno Housing Authority, let's see, we include about 250 staff members. And you know what, Sophia, just give me a second, would you? I'm going to have to redo this because it is not advancing or anything. I apologize.
No worries. No worries.
It works just fine on the practice run,
It
right?
did. It did work fine.
Okay. Share screen. Okay.
When your slides recently came up, we were seeing the presenter's view. That also might help you sort it out.
I'm going to just try to end this sharing situation.
Okay. Maybe it would work better if I get my
Yeah, would you mind like taking over for a second and then I'll go back and get the share screen? I'm so sorry.
It's all right. You want me to pull mine back up?
Yeah, please.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
So now there's you, Fresno Housing.
Okay.
Yep, we're still getting presenter's view. It's interesting.
How about now?
Good.
Okay,
Good.
so my apologies. That took probably as long as the presentation, right?
Okay.
I just mentioned that we've got about 250 staff members and is a very mission-driven team at Fresno Housing. We basically have 2 boards of commissioners with 4 out of our 14 boards of commissioner members being our residents. So been doing this work for a little over 80 years in the community. I'm going to move on and do a lot of pictures this evening and talk about what we do. In a nutshell, and this is oversimplified, we serve about 50,000 residents. It is throughout Fresno County, and we offer services in 2 different primary ways. One is through our Housing Choice Voucher program, often called the Section 8 program. Many are more familiar with that terminology. And it's basically a federally funded program through HUD. We administer about 13,000 vouchers throughout Fresno County to low-income families. And basically these voucher holders are then responsible for finding an apartment or a house in the private rental market. Typically they pay the rest of the rent that isn't offered in part of our voucher program. And it's a really reliable source of income, not only for the low-income residents that we serve, but also for the landlords. The second way that Fresno Housing provides opportunities for affordable housing is through property management work that we do. So we have around 80 properties that we actually own and or manage. However, since 2010, we've also been in the developer game. So developing affordable housing, and the units that we have been developing or renovating account for about 50% of our housing portfolio to date. And when we talk about affordable housing and developing it, there are some really important design elements that are just critical to doing it well. Clearly, one of them is green space community areas. And you'll notice like our family properties will have things like playgrounds, where our senior or our veteran properties wouldn't necessarily have a playground. And certainly not utilized as much during the pandemic. Our developments always feature community rooms. Often they have kitchens and computer labs and things of that nature to help support our services that we offer to our residents. We have an empowerment team. They work with a ton of amazing community-based organizations in the Fresno County area. And, we are currently working on a pilot program with Lanisha Senegal with the Hope Builds team on workforce and career development. We offer paint classes, training on how to do like Sherwin-Williams paint training classes. We do home ownership classes, financial feasibility stuff, workshops, arts and crafts for children, just a lot of services where it's really important that we're able to gather in those community rooms, clearly pandemic aside. It goes without really saying it, but our agency is committed to both high quality and affordability. You don't have to have one without the other. And then we talk a little bit about sustainability. It's such an important part of the long-term viability of these affordable housing properties. The picture that you see right now is actually a property that just received the NARO Award of Excellence this year. It houses formerly homeless veterans, and it's right across from the VA hospital. But that was a property, and you think about sustainability, and we're looking well into the future, 30, 50 years into the future, we want these properties to still be viable for our residents. Just really quickly, I'm going to talk through some highlights. 2020 was difficult. 2021 is continuing to throw some hurdles at us all, but there've also been great successes. Just going to hit on a couple up here. We started out 2020 with a bang. We had 2 groundbreakings in Clovis and Kingsburg. We were recognized at Fresno Housing as the Public Housing Program of the Year by HUD. So we're really doing a lot of good work with HUD. And then March happened. Our team quickly mobilized and began working remotely, but then again, also started doing something we'd never done before and had never allowed before, which was virtual inspections. Still did our migrant center move-in in Parlier at the end of April, where we moved in under the COVID conditions and the safety protocols, nearly 100 families into that property. So we were still able to do business. It just wasn't as usual. Throughout the year, I mentioned we have an amazing empowerment team, and they do so much with our residents, and it included food distributions and just so much more. A lot of people don't know we do an educational scholarship for our residents, and we revamped that. We looked at it through a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens, and we had basically our highest application and award rate to date. So it was pretty successful. COVID certainly did not stop the youth from holding their annual tech camp in partnership with GeekWise Academy and CMAC, great community partners, helping us, do a lot to address the digital divide at our properties and throughout our community. And then just a couple more things real quick. HCB families really enjoyed our drive-through back to school drive-through in our parking lot in downtown Fresno. And then we closed the year out by renovating or repairing 4 of those deteriorated motels along Parkway Drive in the Adams neighborhood. So that was an exciting end to our year. I'm not going to get into a ton of detail on the special initiatives and efforts that are more ongoing for our agency, but I couldn't not say a little bit of something about the California Avenue neighborhood work that's being led by Tiffany Mangum in our office, along with the residents of Southwest Fresno. But Fresno Housing applied for and was awarded some HUD funding for a really comprehensive planning effort that reinvests back into Southwest Fresno. And so I just encourage you, you'll see the @West Fresno Can symbol up there to follow that really, really amazing work. And I'm sure you'll be hearing much more about that. I'm just going to skip through quickly in, recognition of the time I wasted getting my presentation going. But the HPLA went through that with some amazing people this last summer, of handful of folks from Fresno Housing, including Miguel, who you just heard from, another affordable housing developer, Upholdings. There was just some amazing work done around policy around affordable housing in this community and regionally, just like the drive does as well. And then I'll just comment briefly that we have done some really comprehensive surveying of our residents. We've received thousands of responses from them, and they're just providing some amazing input to us on safety issues again, throughout Fresno County. So that was a pretty comprehensive effort. We still have some more work to be done, but that was a great accomplishment for 2020. Speaking of outreach and efforts, we talk a little bit here about the Housing Choice Voucher Program that Sophia's really already told you a bit about. The virtual inspections, there was over 6,600 virtual inspections done from like the time that they started in April through the end of the year. Our team is still out in the field and they're doing exterior inspections still. Developed and launched a new resident portal that's been fantastic for our residents. They don't have to come to the office and drop papers off. They have direct access to their forms and their reports and their recertifications and all the things that they need to do. It's just so much more efficient. And we, as many, I'm sure, are learning there's some of these virtual things that we've put in place because of the pandemic that are probably here to stay. So we're really excited about some of those efficiencies that the residents and the landlords have enjoyed. One thing that I just can't leave this slide without mentioning and putting an emphasis on is we have more need than we have resource. We don't have enough landlords in our program. Well, I think we're around 3,000 landlords as part of the program. There is always a need for more. So I have the email up here, but if you want to go onto our website, we have all kinds of videos and other things going on for new landlords that are interested in becoming part of our HCV program. And there is just really such a tremendous need in our community. And again, it's a benefit for both the residents and the landlords as a steady source of income. So I'm just going to wrap up my presentation with a few photos. We're going to look backwards, and then I'm going to show you a little bit about the future. And I'm thinking of the charts that Sophia was going through, and just keep in mind that our chief real estate officer says to me, remember, 2.5 years to get an affordable housing development done is fast in the world of affordable housing. So I'm starting off with some photos of the home key programs that Sophia had mentioned earlier, and I think H mentioned them as well. And this was really a great unexpected opportunity to purchase dilapidated, blighted motels and transform Parkway Drive in the Adams neighborhood. Before the end of 2020 was over, in rapid fashion, we were able to repair all 4 of the properties that we had purchased and met the health and safety standards. So it wasn't a typical renovation or new development for us. It was kind of more about health and safety. And as H had mentioned, these particular 4 properties represent about 325 units. But on his chart, you would have noticed that some of them he had categorized as emergency homeless housing, because that is what they were doing. So many of the folks that are in these properties were part of the mayor's efforts to really, with Project Off-Ramps, to really get those that were at the highest risk and in the highest need into a home, into somewhere safe. So that's what these 4 properties are. And these are the other 2 right here. The great news about this is that we have flexibility in the funding sources to convert these properties to permanent affordable housing, which is where there is so much need. And we will be able to work with the Adams neighborhood to craft a vision that reflects high quality, affordable neighborhoods. And so we're hoping that this will be a vibrant Parkway Drive one day soon. Also completed in 2020 were renovations at this farm labor housing property of ours. It's called Mariposa Commons, and it was 40 units that were completely renovated. So that was a great accomplishment in 2020. And I'm just gonna look back in time for a second. Some of you will remember this eyesore in downtown Fresno that was held up for so many years on stilts, just to demonstrate the variety of design elements that go into moving into a neighborhood. So whenever we are doing new development in different communities, like City View now, it's now a mixed use development with commercial businesses on the ground floor and housing up above, because that works in a downtown environment. A few years back, Fresno Housing worked alongside residents and some really amazing volunteers in the El Dorado Park neighborhood. And now the San Ramon apartments reflect the needs that those residents had. I'll never forget, you'll see the windows on the outside of this building now. The residents just wanted eyes on the street. That was one of their biggest requests. And so that was a little thing to a developer, but it meant the world to the residents. So that was just another way of saying, like, it's so important that you engage authentically with the residents as part of this work. This is just another example of how blight was removed from a neighborhood doesn't just benefit the residents that we serve, but also the communities and the neighborhood. And, you know, these properties, we really try to put some aesthetic features in to help it blend. Same with the 541 at the South Tower, same thing. So I'm going to last just share some renderings. They will not be actual photographs, even though they look like it. So know that my last couple of slides are going to be renderings of developments that are upcoming. So 5 of these 7 properties I'm going to show you are all in different stages. I'm sorry, they're all in different stages. 5 of the 7 are in Fresno. Starting with Alegre Commons. This just started construction. We've been doing our Place Matters resident engagement strategy out there in that neighborhood. 42 new units will be coming online, and this was vacant land last year. So that started construction. Out in Kingsburg, we've got Linnea Villas, and actually plan a grand opening pretty soon. We are nearing the end of completion. This will be a senior community, 47 brand new units, used to be a vacant lot, as well as the Sola Vita Commons in Clovis. So that was also a vacant and opening soon, with construction of 60 units just about complete. This is an exciting one for folks that are familiar with the Blackstone corridor. This is the Arthur at Blackstone. This is in pre-development, so we're still waiting on funding to come through for some certainty around this, but it will be 41 units and kind of a little bit of a mixture of renovation, some commercial space, and new construction. If you can see in the back, there's like some towers of additional new construction that will go up back there. So that would be 41 units if all of our plans come through. One of our favorite properties, not that there's any favorites, but the Monarch at Chinatown. This was mentioned as part of the TCC investments. Really exciting to be able to help contribute to the transformation happening in Chinatown. Under construction right now, again, it was vacant land and is going to be 57 new units that we consider workforce units. Okay, the last 2 properties are kind of smaller, 26 units here. This is the former Econo Inn under construction. And 28 units under construction at the Villages at Paragon. You'll see in those orange boxes what it looked like before. And that wraps up my photo. So with that, I just want to say thank you. I appreciate your patience with my stumble at the beginning. And I just encourage anybody that's interested in keeping current on updates to follow us on either social media or visit our What's Happening page at the website. So thank you so much.
Wonderful, Kelly. Thank you very much. And I see before we let you go, I just saw a question come up in the chat that relates to something you just mentioned, and that was workforce housing. What is workforce housing? That was from Michael Lynn.
Yeah. Oh, hi, Michael Lynn Lewis. Great to hear from you. Unless there's another Michael Lynn out there that cares about all this stuff, my apologies. So the workforce housing, and somebody else could probably be much more technical about this than me, but it's basically some of our housing is designed for seniors, some is designed for farm laborers, some is designed for veterans or homeless. And so workforce housing is just that. It's designed more for a workforce So they're going to be smaller units, maybe not family units. And it just fits so well with the development in Chinatown because it's right near transit and all the stuff that's going on with TCC. I hope that answers you. And Michaelin, you know how to find me. So if that didn't answer your question enough, please reach out.
Thank you, Kelly. And I realize we have some questions in the queue, so we will get to those in just a moment. I did want to talk a little bit about next steps and where is this conversation going. We, again, want to emphasize that the full Housing Element Annual Progress Report is available on our website, as are those highlights brochures. And we would love to hear your comments. We will obviously save your comments from the meeting this evening, but if you wanted to submit more, you may email them to me at the email sophiapagalatas@fresno.gov. And this PowerPoint will be posted on our website, so you'll be able to find it. We are planning on presenting our annual progress report to the City Council in May, probably May 13th. And we would love to have your comments by May 6th, so that we can communicate those to the Council and to the Department of Housing and Community Development. So those are next steps. And now we're open for questions and comments. And I did want to go ahead and respond to the two that were in the queue. So, Summer, can you help me out with this? Can everyone see these questions, or shall I read it before I answer it?
When I press this button, answer live, people will be able to see it. And I'm happy to read it out to you as well. This question is from Eric Payne. The city of Fresno is drastically behind on meeting the governor's mandate to increase its new affordable housing unit production. It would require its annual approval of 1,200 new housing production units in 2020. Would need to quadruple to 5,000 affordable housing annually. How will the city meet this goal and do business differently?
Thanks for that question, Eric. And certainly we have big challenges in front of us. So there are a couple of things, strategic things that we are doing related to our land use plans that I think merit mentioning. And one of them is that we've planned ever since 2014, when we adopted our general plan, to have mixed use, higher density development along our transit corridors. And so the primary corridors are Blackstone and Kings Canyon. And then we also have other corridors that are in development on Cedar and Shaw. And we're currently looking at how to actually catalyze and help that development happen. There's really huge housing capacity along those corridors. And currently the city has a grant to look at catalyzing transit-oriented development along Kings Canyon. So that is one strategy that we're using. Another one is with our LEAP grant, we are looking at, planting the seed for an affordable housing trust fund. And if a fund is established, it will then enable a dedicated source of funding for affordable housing, a new funding stream, essentially. So those are two strategies that we're working on toward your question.
Thank you, Sophia. And from an anonymous attendee, I have a question. With the rise in racial and economic inequality, we create slavery and lack of achieving the American dream and the right to own a home when we build apartments. What is the city doing to make sure this type of slavery stops?
Right. And I think, we look at housing as a continuum. So our housing element asks us to create a diversity of housing types. So that means, apartments and accessory dwelling units, as well as, ownership options, which which maybe aren't always single family homes. They might be condos and cottages and, you know, townhomes. There's all kinds of options, but we are trying to offer home buyer assistance. And if there are any partners on this call that want to talk about, I know that Self-Help Enterprises facilitates home ownership and of course sweat equity into the building and ownership of homes. And then our own housing division has some home buyer assistance funds on the way, if I'm not mistaken. So Kelly, I was curious, does the Housing Authority have any kind of home buyer assistance, or is that really not this within the scope of what you do?
Right, well, so I mean, clearly a lot of what I talked about focused on higher unit count, but we had a homeownership program, and actually just last month we had one of our participants purchase outright their home finally. So I mean, there are smaller programs that we get through our funding sources and have administered in the past. And just this month, we facilitated a workshop on home ownership, but we don't traditionally do a lot. That's not a big part of our portfolio.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'll move on to the next one.
Thank you, Sophia. I have a question from Artie Padilla. Sophia, can you expand on how you search for land for future development of housing? How is equity woven into deciding on sites?
Thank you for that question, Artie. So our housing element includes what I called a site inventory. And if you recall, each housing element has to identify housing element sites in order to accommodate the regional housing needs allocation. So the city essentially identifies all vacant land that are that's within city limits and puts it on the housing sites inventory, and then housing developers select from those where they want to build housing. So the city in this case is kind of a facilitator, and it's our job to ensure that there are adequate sites in all areas of the city.
Thank you. And as a reminder, we're also taking verbal public comment. So if you would like to provide verbal comment, please feel free to raise your hand or dial *9. And until then, we'll continue with the question and answer here. So I have another question from Eric Payne. Housing is actively working to meet its obligation to affirmatively further fair housing.
Thank you, Eric. I think, you know, that question has a lot of answers. I think one of them is ensuring that our housing sites inventory has land, you know, in all areas of the city. We also just recently completed the analysis of impediments to fair housing, and that document includes strategies for overcoming those impediments. And we also have the anti-displacement efforts that are underway that are really looking at sort of a fair housing theme there as well. So I would leave it at that for now.
Thank you very much, Sophia. I have another question from Cassandra Garibay. Cassandra says, hello, I'm a housing reporter with the Fresno Bee. Could you please expand on the potential for an affordable housing trust fund? Is there a timeline for this as of now?
Thank you, Cassandra. Yes, I would say there is a timeline in that we included this program in a grant that we received called the LEAP grant, the Local Early Action Planning Grant. So the establishment of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is one of several work products in that grant. And of course, it would need to be approved by the City Council, but it is being diligently worked on right now, and we hope to have something in front of the council soon.
Awesome, very good. Okay, so I have no further questions in the Q&A. Again, this time it is open to the public to answer or ask any questions. If you would like to raise your hand, feel free to do so and it'll put you in queue. We can call on you. Or if you're joining us by phone, again, it is *9 to raise your hand.
And I do see another question that's come in, Summer.
Yes, thank you. So I have from an anonymous attendee. Is it possible that when you do this to facilitate developers, does the city put language to ensure that it is for house ownership and not apartments for rent?
I would say that it depends. That's probably about the best answer I can give. All of the funds that the city receives for housing are usually very much focused on creating a certain kind of housing. So each fund has its own obligations. So certain funds might be able to be used for ownership housing where other funds may not. And I'm sorry I can't provide more detail, but we can dig into any of this with any of you if you want to reach out to us and send us an email. We can dig deeper.
Thank you, Sophia. The question from Eric Payne. On January 19th, 2021, the City Council of City of Sacramento voted unanimously to move forward with allowing up to 4 homes on any property in the city, effectively bidding farewell to single-family zoning. Will the City of Fresno adopt this inclusive policy?
Thanks for that, Eric. So I can't predict what our city council might want to do, but I will say that we, as part of our LEAP grant, we are trying to really incentivize accessory dwelling units. And those would be additional units that can be placed on single family lots. So that is the effort that we're working on now, and time will tell as to what our council may want to do.
Awesome. At this time, Sophia, I don't see any other questions. Oh, I'm so sorry. One in chat from Angelica Torres. When will this item go before the council?
May 13th is our current target date.
Okay. Great. We'll go back to you, Sophia.
Oh, I see a flash. Did something else happen in the chat? Maybe a couple more questions. Let's see. Yeah, maybe.
Angelica, I'm not quite sure. Oh, one moment. Let me see if I can. I'm going to allow you to talk so we can hopefully clarify what your question is. Angelica, you are able to unmute yourself.
Is that better?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. The question, I know that this item on the progress report will go up to the council on the 13th, but you were answering the question about that single unit more, that question that somebody else asked.
Mm-hmm.
When would that, you said that you guys are working on something like that, on that concept. When would that item be going to the council?
Do you mean incentivizing more single family home ownership, or was it about the 4 units on one property? Okay, that's not, that particular item is not scheduled for council. It's not formally under consideration right now.
Oh, okay. But you are working on something like that.
We're working on facilitating additional units, which we call accessory dwelling units, on single family home lots. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Are there any other questions from the public? Yes, I have one from Eric Payne. Eric says, centuries of decisions and policies have shaped our city to be the way it looks today, including racial and economic segregation that persists into the 21st century. Over time, those decisions and policies created unequal neighborhoods with unequal access to education, jobs, safety, health, and opportunity. Local, state, and federal governments have attempted to reverse discrimination and segregation for decades, but there is still work to be done. Are you committed to this?
Absolutely. Easy question.
And I see H is also typing an answer. Perfect, thank you. And he agrees. Awesome, and I have Artie who would like to provide verbal comment. Artie, you are able to now unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. Sophia, can I expand on my earlier question?
Yes.
And to help my small brain, I'm trying to learn some of these processes. You provide a list of vacant lots to the developers, and then they choose based on the buckets, those buckets that you described. Is there a mechanism in place so that like the developers just don't choose all the northern lots and leave the southern lots? What's in place for that, or is anything in place?
There really isn't, and it's even an exaggeration in some ways to say we provide, every time a developer wants to build something, they look at our list. I mean, they just do what they do, and use their their market analysis to decide where they're going to build, I would presume. But it's our job to ensure that there is enough vacant buildable land in all areas of the city. But yes, but we don't, besides, our general plan calls for roughly half of all units built in the city to be built within the city limits that were in place in 2012. So there's kind of a geographic parameter, roughly half infill, but beyond that, no, nothing like what you're asking about.
Are you aware of any cities that have some type of like equity mechanism in place for developers to kind of adhere to, or is that just not ever?
No, I mean, I think that there are, I think that's more and more, that's becoming a conversation and a consideration, as it is here.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Sophia.
Mm-hmm.
H, I saw you typing in the chat. Did you want to add anything to that?
No, I just think Artie's question that developers can include that category does include nonprofits and community development corporations as well. So we've just had a couple of presentations recently from the network that you work with, Artie, the Fresno Economic Development Partnership. I think I got that right. Community Economic Partnership, which was well received. I mean, the city manager said you guys hit the ball out of the park, and it was basically one presentation after another for development in areas served by CDCs.
Great, thank you very much, H. And I think related to this question, an anonymous attendee asked, is this process through free enterprise or eminent domain?
I would say free enterprise. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Wonderful, thank you. And I have Michael Lynn. Michael Lynn, you are now able to unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. This question is for Kelly. Kelly, in your capacity with the Housing Authority, do you know if there's a program that will help people with single housing, single family home vouchers, help improve the property or help the landlord to improve the property that these houses are a part of? Because sometimes you can almost tell when the home is Section 8 or voucher program. Yards are not kept up as well, and a lot of the landlords said they can't afford to do that. So do you know if there's a program that the Housing Authority has that it could implement?
Michael, and I'm so sorry. I know that question is directed to Kelly. She unfortunately was having connectivity issues and had to drop. Sophia, do you have any insight to that program or a program they may have?
I don't, but I'd be happy to help follow up with the Housing Authority. And if anybody else on our panel knows about any, wave your hand and we'll have you speak. But otherwise, Michael, and we can follow up with Fresno Housing on that.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
And I have Angelica Torres. Angelica, you are able to unmute yourself.
Sorry. Thank you. Going back, Sophia, to that same question where the eminent domain that where Artie was asking,
Mm-hmm.
Are these land that you're showing developers to facilitate, is it city owned or is it just empty lots that belong to private people?
So most of it is not city owned. It's privately owned lands, mostly vacant. And this, the state has very strict guidelines about what lands we can put in our inventory. And they certainly don't support, displacement. So yeah, does that answer your question?
It does. That's probably why you said free enterprise and not eminent domain. But what mechanism does your department play in? Say a developer says, I like this property because it makes sense with my planning and the economic growth.
So the city really just tracks the development that happens on its inventory. So when a developer develops housing, they might, there's different ways this can happen, but if a developer is developing market rate housing, usually we won't hear about it until they're ready to apply for, their maps and their permits. However, affordable housing developers like self-help enterprises or Fresno Housing, they might collaborate a little bit more with the city on the land, but they do their own due diligence as well. There are now some, in the back of our annual progress report, Table H, I believe, is a list of surplus lands that are now trackable and being put out there for potential affordable housing development as well.
In what page? I'm sorry.
I believe it's Table H. It's the last table in our annual progress report. Could one of our staff just verify that for me, please? Casey or Drew?
And when we verify that, Angelica, we will put that in the chat for you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Summer.
Absolutely. I have another question in Q&A from an anonymous attendee. They say, for Program 5, will there be any efforts towards the exploration and potential partnerships with nonprofit entities to support the development of a land bank or community land trust for affordable housing?
I don't think there are at the moment, but that doesn't mean that there couldn't be.
Can I jump in, Sophia?
Yes, please.
So we're working with Habitat right now on a project at Willow and Bird, and Habitat intends to own that project through a community land trust.
Ah, okay. Thank you. So there's an example of a community land trust.
Great, thank you. Another question from Eric Payne. Eric says, even though it is no longer legal, redlining has affected the lives of residents across our city's inception. This government-sanctioned practice systematically denied non-white households access to mortgages and thus home ownership, preventing generations of families from building wealth through appreciating home values. This was exacerbated in the city, the obliteration of once thriving Black neighborhoods through eminent domain for freeway construction. What policies has the city adopted to undo, I cuts off, but I believe to undo this?
Right. Thanks again, Eric. I think that all of the, I really think the entire policy framework that the city has right now is trying to invest in neighborhoods that have not had investment for a very long time, and to improve the quality of life in those neighborhoods. So as well as expand housing opportunity for all across the entire city. So I see the city's work as addressing your concern, at least in part.
Thank you, Sophia. And another question from Artie Padilla. Artie asks, can you share about reclaiming property from negligent property owners and how that report can go toward housing?
Well, thank you, Artie. I can sort of talk about that. I did look at a program in Richmond, and perhaps Tom Morgan can speak to that a little bit more. I know that that is something that has happened in Fresno. Tom, can you give us any more insight on that?
If Kelly was still on, I'd defer to her, even though she's no longer with the city. That effort, I believe, I think you're referring to receivership.
Yes.
That's actually through the Code Enforcement Division in the City Attorney's Office, and not through our department.
Okay. We could follow up with more detail on that at a future point, but I know it's something that we have looked at.
Thank you. Artie also asks, well, he thanks H for mentioning the Community and Economic Development Partnership. He says they're working on building their capacity to be developers of housing in concentrated poverty neighborhoods. Thank you, Artie, for that work. That is very important. We appreciate that comment.
Yes.
Okay, at this time, I do not see any other questions, either in chat, Q&A, or any hands raised. So Sophia, I think we're back to you.
Okay, well, I do have one response, and it is table H in the progress report that responds to the question about land. And with that, I thank you all, attendees and panelists alike, for participating in this conversation. And we hope to hear from you, or maybe your friends, at our next meeting. We are having another workshop. It'll be just like this one, or at least the same presentations, a week from tonight at 6 p.m. And we thank you all for your participation.